Welcome to Enrichment Today podcast, hosted by Dr. Amy Christine Blansett. This podcast covers topics to build stability and find tranquility in your life. Join us to discuss topics to improve your financial health, change your limiting beliefs, improve your wellness, and so much more, all to increase your self-sufficiency. If you like this podcast, make sure to follow the Enrichment Today podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and follow the Drew Lewis Foundation on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. You can also check us out on our websites, enrichmenttoday.org and drewlewis.org. Now sit back, relax, and learn to break some crayons with us.
I am Holly Melton, and I am so glad to welcome you here today for another episode of Enrichment Today from the Drew Lewis Foundation. While Amy Blansett is out on a medical leave, I'm sitting in for her. And again, Holly Melton, recovering financial advisor. I have chosen to take my life in a different path, and I absolutely love working with the Drew Lewis Foundation, helping people as a financial mentor, financial educator, and most recently, Director of Development. So send me your donation dollars. It's end of year. Let's get that done. With me today is a wonderful guest. Her name is Shannon Joy. Shannon is one of our Drew Lewis RISE members, and RISE is the educational part of the Drew Lewis Foundation. It is a great way to bring people into the community for a 16-week class that educates them on budgeting, on all things financial, helps them with some social and emotional connection, just kind of guides people through a difficult part of their lives so that they can put themselves into the place that they need to be, build their lives, but we're there as a support system. And Shannon has done a remarkable job since she came to Drew Lewis Foundation and started RISE. And I cannot wait for you to hear everything that she has today. So thank you for joining us. And Shannon, go ahead, give us a little detail about what brought you to Drew Lewis, how you found it, and we'll just kind of start from there and build, because it's an awesome story.
Well, I started RISE 3 years ago, and the reason that I came, I had a great job, single mom. My life was actually fairly put together, especially to anyone looking in from the outside. However, I have a lot of medical issues, and when you have a job as a single parent in the past, that meant that you weren't eligible for Medicaid. And so when you have a ton of medical issues and there's no insurance offered through your job, those bills stack up. Mm-hmm. And I had $163,000 in medical bills when I came here. Mm-hmm. And I knew that they helped with budgeting. I knew that they helped people to get out of debt. And my son volunteered as a tutor at
He volunteered as a tutor, but
that's how I found out about RISE. And the first time that I came through, they actually told me that I didn't qualify because I made too much money. And then I tried again a year later, and they said, okay, we changed the stipulations, so now you can actually get the help that you need. And I have actually been able to pay off over $100,000 of that debt.
Through different things that you learned with budgeting with Drew Lewis, and things that you've learned on your own. And
yeah, so budgeting with Drew Lewis was a huge part of it, but also learning how to advocate for myself and who I needed to call, where I needed to go. Those things all made a huge difference as well.
Yeah, I agree, because medical debt is mounting in our country. People are filing bankruptcy. It's ruining lives. And Shannon was one of those people who spoke up for herself, called the hospital and said, this is the deal. I can't afford all of this. How are we going to deal with it? So she advocated for herself. And then she combined that with the budgeting classes from RISE. And that's what brought her out. You said you paid over
$100,000.
Yeah, paid off over $100,000 in medical debt through, and it's perseverance, right? You can be told everything, but then you have to do it. So Shannon is one of those people that is very, very driven, which brings us to the next part. Her career really took off in the art world, and it was relatively new to you.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell us about that. How did you get into the art world? Because she is a remarkably beautiful artist.
Thank you. In 2013, I found myself in a battered women's shelter with my kids, and I started taking an art therapy class. And when I was young, I drew and sketched, and I made paper dolls, and I was pretty creative. But when I grew up, probably around the age of 14, I stopped doing anything with art at all. And so when I found myself in that battered women's shelter and they gave you the list of classes that you had to take, I was like, the art therapy sounds probably the best for me. And so I took that class, and it was so therapeutic, and it was just absolutely incredible to like come alive again. And
I love that.
So when I left, one of the things that I knew I needed was a sketch pad. And I never anticipated painting, much less huge paintings, because I had always just done black and white little sketches. However, I had this dream probably 2 weeks after I moved into my home, and I woke up and I thought, I need to paint that. And then I thought, what? That is super weird. And so it just kept hounding me, and it was almost 2 weeks before I was finally like, okay. And I started painting with my daughter's watercolors that you get in those coloring books, and then I went to Walmart and got a couple of other colors to like finish off the painting. And I posted it on a social media platform that had asked, what is something that helps you to be healthier? And I was like, well, this is something that's really helping me right now. And I ended up selling 9 prints of that first painting that I did.
Gosh.
And I thought, that is pretty crazy. Like, I never thought of myself as a painter. And so over the years, I kind of just, dilly-dallied and played with it. And I wasn't really serious about it. I was going to school full-time. I was working full-time. And I was single mom to 2 kids. And so painting was just that thing that I did for myself. But they always sold, which, was also good as a single mom. And so in 2018, I got really sick. And I spent a huge chunk of September through December in the hospital. They thought that I was dying, and I prepared myself, prepared my kids. And when I came out of that situation, perfectly healthy, I still have some issues, but in comparison to what I had been, I realized that I needed to change my life. And as much as a career in human resources was incredible, and I felt like I was helping people, I knew that wasn't where I wanted to be, and I knew that I wanted to spend more time with my kids and focus on the things that really drove me. And when I took a deep dive and looked at what I wanted to do, it was be creative, inspire people, help people, and be with my kids. And I didn't know how I was going to do that, but I walked into my boss's office one day and I said, I'm just going to go home. And she said, for the day? I said, no, I don't think this is it for me. And she said, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. And I was doing some content writing. I was doing some art. Those things were selling. They were picking up. But it definitely wasn't stable enough for me to have actually said that. But I knew that I needed a change. And so I just jumped off the cliff and said, I'm going for it. And I'm so thankful every day that I did. Now I own Hey Girl Digital Marketing with my partner, Amanda.
Okay, so let me say that again for everybody. It's called Hey Girl
Digital Marketing.
Okay.
HeyGirlMarketing.com.
Okay.
And I own Shannon Joy Creative. And I'm not really involved in the day-to-day in Hey Girl anymore. Amanda has kind of taken that on as her own. But Shannon Joy Creative has definitely started to take off, and now I am painting every single day and writing every single day and just absolutely doing what I love.
So tell everybody what you're painting and how they can reach out to you to experience your art, because what Shannon does is an experience. It's not just something that she slaps together. It is truly wonderful.
I do inspirational art, I think would be probably the best term for it. I don't even know if that is a term, because it's not the words.
It is
it's not
now.
Inspiring words. Yeah. But basically, when I paint something, I want to paint it with a story. Mm-hmm. And so whether it's a commission that I'm painting for someone, whether it's a mural that I'm doing, whatever I'm doing, I want to make sure that it speaks to you and it brings joy and it lightens up your life somehow. And so that it's been really fun. I have done some logos, and I really like taking what people tell me or who they are and translating that into art.
Oh, I love that.
And so I find that working with businesses and being able to see the vision that they have for their company and kind of make that into a piece of artwork is so fun. But also with individuals. Like when I had a guy who was going through some stormy seasons in his life, and I was able to paint him a picture, and it was a tree, and it was blowing and bending in the wind, and the storm was raging all around it, and I called it Fortitude because I wanted to remind him that no matter what happened around him, he was still strong enough to stand. And I think that is the purpose of my art, is to reach people and say, no matter where you're at in life, no matter what's happening right now, like this piece of beauty, that is you. And so it's kind of taken off this year.
I love that. And I've seen a couple pieces. You did one for the Drew Lewis Foundation, and on the YouTube, am I right, Zach? On the YouTube part of this presentation, where it's the visual part, we're going to have some of Shannon's artwork so that you can see some of the things that she's done. One way or the other, we're going to present some of Shannon's artwork. It'll either be on our website, on the enrichmenttoday.com website, somehow or another, Instagram, Facebook, but we've got to get it out there so that you can see it, because it is absolutely gorgeous and it speaks to me. Art's one of those things that I have to feel it, and that's how I feel when I see Shannon's pieces. And then the other thing that you do that I love is you've done murals around town and some of the surrounding communities, and murals are, sometimes it's the writing of the company, like the company's name on the building. Sometimes it's a really cool design. She's doing one for a restaurant down on South Campbell. And then what I also love, she's doing Christmas windows. So you've done a ton of the Christmas windows, which are really happy and joyful and relate to the businesses, and that's probably the fun part.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's kind of all fun. I honestly feel like I just get to play all day, every day, which doesn't feel fair sometimes.
You get to play with them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we talk about breaking crayons. You get to play with the paints, so
Yes.
that's kind of cool.
Yes.
And then your commissioned pieces are probably what is most satisfying, I would think, because that's when you get to delve into what that person is like, and that's where the inspirational art really comes to fruition.
Absolutely. I love designing a piece for an individual and hearing their story and designing something that really relates to where they are right now. And I've actually had a lot of people, as where they are changes, come back and say, hey, this is where I'm at now. Do you think you could paint something else? And so it's really fun because you get to hear people's stories, which I'm super passionate about. Everyone has a story, and everyone's story is important. And I think I was a storyteller before I was ever an artist. And so that part of it is my heart and soul, and I absolutely love that.
Yeah, that does sound like it sounds like it's not work, it's a treat to get to do that. I kind of felt that way about finance. How weird is that?
Yeah.
Now I feel that way about Drew Lewis. It's my passion.
Thank you for listening to Enrichment Today, brought to you by the Drew Lewis Foundation. At the Drew Lewis Foundation, we educate, empower, and support underserved families through personalized programs and coaching to increase the quality of life and build resilient communities. If you like Enrichment Today, make sure to follow Enrichment Today and Drew Lewis Foundation on social media. And now, back to the show.
So I want to transition us into, the cool part about Shannon is she is an advocate. She not only advocates for herself, she advocates for others, and she was instrumental in bringing an important piece or pieces of legislation to the Missouri. You take it away because I don't want to misspeak, so tell me everything that you did.
Okay, well, basically what I've done is just advocate, write letters, speak, different things for a couple of bills that I really believed in. And so I am becoming more involved in different aspects of legislation and advocating in the community and different things like that. But at this point, it's just letters and speaking to my experience in regards to what they are. But some exciting bills that we have passed in Missouri this year. The Medicaid Expansion passed, and you heard a little bit about my story with how being a single mom, even as an employed person, I wasn't able to pay all of my bills. And so the Medicaid expansion passing will help so many people who were in that situation. And I'm super thankful that we were able to pass that in Missouri.
So tell me, when you say we, are you a part of a group that's advocating, or?
My friend, well, I'm not really part of any group in particular. Okay. It's just something that is a passion of mine, kind of like my art. I just want to help people.
Sure.
And that was part of leaving my job, and so that's something that I'm dedicated to. And so I will find ways to be involved with causes that I believe in.
Okay.
And so not any particular group.
And one of them is Medicaid Expansion.
Mm-hmm.
So that includes single moms being able to get Medicaid now, right?
They
and
now
not just
have
for
a
specific.
single persons or single parent family plan.
Nice.
For Medicaid.
Yeah.
And kind of going in line with that, the Cliff Effect bill, Single Moms Rock with Janelle Reed, was really involved with the Cliff Effect bill, and I was able to write a letter for that. And
so tell me a little bit more about that one.
So the Cliff Effect bill, basically the way that our system was set up is if you make $12 an hour, you can still get all of your benefits. So you would get food stamps, you would get childcare, and don't quote me on the $12 an hour, it might be lower than that actually.
Okay.
But you could get childcare, Medicaid for your kids, food stamps, different things. If you made $12.25 an hour, all of that went away.
Okay. So it was just a slight increase, mm-hmm. which didn't make a huge change in your
income,
your living standards.
Mm-hmm.
And you lost all of the benefits that were helping.
Correct. And so what we saw is people who were on state programs had to either stay on state programs or make this giant leap mm-hmm. that is nearly impossible. And so that's why it's called the cliff effect, because there's that big gap
jumping
right
off
there.
a cliff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so basically Crystal Quaid led getting this bill passed, and now what happens is as your income goes up, your benefits decrease in a similar amount.
In a proportionate,
Mm-hmm.
I see. Okay.
And so instead of having to jump all the way to the top of a cliff, you can climb a stairway.
Okay.
And so that one was pretty awesome, and watching that go through Single Moms Rock and seeing all of the people that potentially affected was pretty powerful. I also have a friend, Janice who runs Surviving Domestic Violence in Southwest Missouri.
Okay.
And her and a lady named Lisa Saylor have been at the forefront of passing an expansion of the stalking statute so that it includes digital stalking. I mean, it really expanded the terminology to where it's much more modern than just somebody
following you.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then also lifetime protection orders passed. And for me, I'm about to cry.
That's okay.
For
I was
me,
going to say, if you need a second.
That
because
one was so huge. I work with a lot of domestic violence victims and have obviously been one. That's why I was in the battered women's shelter. And in Missouri, your protection order would only last 1 year at a time. And then you'd have to go back to court. And if they didn't do anything in that 1 year, then your protection order would be denied.
if the perpetrator didn't do anything that caused them to need to extend that protection order, then it disappeared and you were vulnerable again.
Correct.
Okay.
And that lifetime protection order now, a judge can say, you cannot come in contact with this person for the rest of their lives. And the safety and the security that that gives people is just incredible. So I got my first call last week, and someone had gotten a lifetime protection order. And hearing the relief was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, that is a bittersweet story to have to tell, because the only way you could advocate for that was to have been in that situation, which is never easy to talk about. So it's a part of Shannon's history, but she's not building her story around that. It's something that she experienced, and she is working really hard to define herself in other ways. But the strength that she gained from that and the lessons, that's what she's moving forward with, right? It's important that you acknowledge when something tragic happens and that it has been life-altering and it has changed you. But we want to be very aware of not getting stuck in the repetition of what happened, because we can get stuck there in our minds, right? And never feel like we can move forward. And it's not something that happened overnight. It's taken Shannon a while to take one footstep at a time. Mm-hmm. But I've only known Shannon since the spring of 2021, but just in the 8 months that I've known her, it's been a blessing to see how she's growing and evolving, and getting stronger from everything that she's focusing on for her future. So it has been an absolute joy, as in Shannon Joy. So the legislation has been a huge part as well. What I want to move to now is yesterday when we were talking, you really emphasized this cool concept that you're employing about minimums and margins, mm-hmm. and how it's helping you not just financially, but emotionally set healthy boundaries, set intentions that are progressive. So let's speak to that, if you would, please.
Okay. I had a life coach a while back, and I remember her telling me, you have no margin in your life. And I had no idea what that meant. And she tried to explain it to me, but I wasn't in a place to hear it at that point in time. And as I've grown over the past few years, I've realized that what she means is that we all need a soft space. So wiggle room. Yeah. So life can be challenging, and it never quite goes according to plan. And the grace to deal with that comes from having those margins. And so it kind of goes along with my setting minimums. Those two together, I think, have made the biggest change in my life, because in my growth, it started, so say when I was in the shelter, I didn't have a job. I didn't believe I could have a job. I didn't have an education. It was just it was a lot of I don't haves.
And I'll never be able to.
Correct.
Right.
And so that first step was getting a job, and it didn't pay well. It was something that helped people because that's my heart and that's what I wanted out of that situation. But I had a job.
Right.
And I was able to build on that, and then I started my education. And then, and it's just those little steps that you take, and you create a minimum in your life. So say in your bank account, you say, okay, I'm done overdrafting my bank account. I will never go below 0. And that's your minimum. Well, eventually you could get to, I will never go below $50. I will never go below $200. And that minimum keeps growing, and that's your bottom line. And it's like that with every area of life. The relationships that you keep, the things that you do with your time, you have to put value on those things. And so you set these minimums and you say, okay, that person has disrespected me 3 times. I'm going to not be involved with them anymore. And then you're like, oh, that person has disrespected me 1 time. I think I'm good. And so it's just, it's a matter of setting those boundaries for yourself. And each time that you set a boundary, just try to improve it a little bit. And then,
and it's a part of knowing your intrinsic value, right? Your worth, because you're worth setting those boundaries.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then as far as the margins go, I thought of a really interesting one, because for me, I love my morning time before the kids get up. Like, that's so important to me, and that is my big margin time. And then after the kids go to bed, that's like my finish everything up margin that I didn't get done that day. But in the morning, that is just my time to have some peace and quiet, do some meditation, some yoga, just kind of get that day started on the right foot. And it makes such a huge difference. But I have realized that I didn't put much margin in my work day. And so I've started telling people I'll be there around this time, because then if something happens and I'm 15 minutes over, or if I'm a little bit early, I'm like, okay, this is good. And as a painter, I can do that. I know that's not the case for everyone. I think a margin, if you had a set schedule, would be to make sure that you have drive time, or to, and so that makes a huge difference, because if you're not scheduling your drive time, then you can't just pop in someplace and magically anymore. Exactly.
Or ever.
Or ever. Although that would be nice.
It's not Harry Potter.
But just having those margins. Another thing with the minimums is, for a long time, we would use the plastic cups or the junk cups and plates, and keep the nice ones for when guests come over. Well, guests don't come over too often. And so one of the things that I did as a minimum is we're going to use the nice plates and cups when we eat as a family, because we're worth it too.
Yeah.
Or like your towels in the bathroom. Like, you should use what you have and know that you're worth using those, because if they're reserved for someone who would be a guest in your home, you are just as worthy.
Yeah.
And so it's just little things like that. And as your mindset changes, you learn how to value yourself a little bit more each time something transitions. And so when you create those minimums for yourself, and then you give yourself grace and you give yourself those margins, it changes the entirety of your life.
Yeah, I love that. Give yourself grace. Another way of saying give yourself margins. And I do appreciate that, because having gone from being self-employed to working for an organization again, you have to budget in, I got to drive somewhere. So that can be anywhere between 15 minutes and 30 minutes in Springfield. So I completely understand that. And I love those concepts of minimums and margins. It kind of relates to one of the things that we teach people in the RISE class is to start saving for $1,000 minimum account that you have, at least $1,000, so that if you have an emergency, you've got that money to fall back on. A tire pops, a heater goes out in your home or air conditioner, the refrigerator stops working, you have that cushion. And then we encourage folks to move from having the $1,000 emergency fund to also building like 3 to 6 months of income, so that if another shutdown happens or whatever the case, you can't work, you've got those funds built up so that your family isn't panicked about what's going to happen next. And then we move into the long term, maybe retirement or investments or saving for a house. But those are some of the things, practical applications that we have in Rise. Shannon is just a wonderful blend of the actual financial and the emotional, the socioeconomic whole picture of how people just work to change their lives, change the community, because if you change your life, you're going to change your community and you're going to make it better for everyone. This isn't about one person, this is about everybody. And I teach fitness on the side, and one of the things I tell people when we're at the end of our yoga practice is think of something about yourself that is positive, something that you admire, a quality, strength, resilience. Take that quality with you for the rest of the day and express it in word, thought, or deed to everyone you come in contact with. And we are going to make things a little bit better every day. It's like she said, those minimums, taking that one step at a time. I know we've talked in other podcasts about how do you eat the elephant? It's one bite at a time. It's a little gross, but it's a great analogy, right? So I am so thankful that you are here today, and we want to put Shannon's websites in the information from our production today, so that you can go to her websites and see her art. You can order prints. You can even possibly hire her to do some very specific portraits and murals and inspirational art. So we're so thankful to have everybody join us today. We're looking forward to when Amy is back up and running, literally, and she'll be here to do some more podcasts with us. But until then, I'm Holly Melton with Shannon Joy, and we appreciate you joining us for this episode of Enrichment Today. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Enrichment Today podcast. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And visit our websites enrichmenttoday.org and drewlewis.org. Until next time, remember to break some crayons.